Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm going to talk about why your Dungeons & Dragons custom world is an offense to every single Dungeons & Dragons player in the world, and why you should shutter it and never run it again. Here we go. All right. So let's define our terms. So first of all, I'm going to say Dungeon Master in this. So let's define our terms: Dungeon Master, Dragon Player, okay, and Game Master. So Dungeon Master, that is you run Dungeons and Dragons, right? When you say Dungeon Master, people understand you're not playing some silly OSR nonsense or running something that's not D&D and subjecting your players to second tier tabletop role playing games, right? You're playing what the historical gem from 1974 that echoes with Gary Gygax's brilliance, right? Game Master, you're some sad sack that's suggesting your players to something that's not top tier, to like you're serving up pablum, right? Your players are never going to eat steak, right? Like that's Game Master. There you go. All right, and you're running like some nonsense like OSE or who knows what. And yeah, so there you go. Or Castles and Crusades, whatever, right? You can't, like, if you run Castles and Crusades, you've forfeited your Dungeon Master card, right? All right, Dungeon Master, you're part of an honorable history of an honorable history, right? Now, what about Dragon Player? That is a Dungeons and Dragons player, and I'm trying to get this off the ground. Dungeon Master, Dragon Player, right? When you say you're a Dragon Player, you're a player in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So those are my terms. All right, okay. Let's talk about your D&D custom world. Okay, what is that? All right, so I had one, and you have one too, right? Mine was called Thracion, and it was 300 years ago. It was, it was Tolkien, right? Tolkien with a little plus, right? Right. So Tolkien world, humans, elves, dwarves, right? And we could call that. I think at this point we can safely call that like flat fantasy, right? American flat fantasy, right? Because and by the way, if you didn't notice, Lord of the Rings is American now. We bought it. So we get the glory now, Britain. Yeah. Okay. All right. So basically, and then my world was Thracion, had these 7 floating cities, and they were all ruled by 7 different sisters, and they all had 7 different economies. Like, one was a textile city, one was like a banking city, and one was like a weapons forging city, and they all floated above the ground. And on the ground, right, they're actually traversing anywhere on Thracion. The ground was incredibly dangerous. It was just nothing but monsters and terrain dangers, right? And you were highly likely to die. But the monsters themselves, their bones, their blood, everything in them was valuable. There's actually literally just gems sitting on the ground, lots of incredible resources, right? But the moment you hit there, it's incredibly deadly, right? So the only cities on all of Thracion are these 7 floating cities, and then cities that have been put into that are elevated. They're either put into the trees, or and the entire none of the city touches the ground, or they're in mountains. And there's a whole bunch of more information about Thracion. I have completely shuttered it, and I haven't used it in probably 3 or 4 years. And the reason why is I run in Forgotten Realms now. Why? Why did I shutter my super cool Thracion world? And why should you shutter your super cool Dungeons & Dragons custom world? Because it's an offense to every single dragon player out there. Here's why. You are wasting their time, okay? Now, first of all, my world was pretty cool, right? And it had some neat, it was pretty cool, and it had some neat differentiators from Forgotten Realms. It was a little different than Forgotten Realms. But what was the difference, right? It was about 15, 20%, but most of it was the same, right? Now, here's the thing. If I run in Forgotten Realms, I can bring the coolest aspects of Thracion right into Forgotten Realms, because everybody expects that my Forgotten Realms is going to be a little different than somebody else's Forgotten Realms. But here's the thing, right? So, actually, I ran Thracion for 6 years, right? And I had players in Thracion for 6 different years. Now, why was that an offense to those dragon players, those Dungeons & Dragons players? Why was that offensive to them? Because I wasted their time, right? Every single one of those players has gone on to play in other Dungeon Masters games or become Dungeon Masters themselves. In fact, the majority of players who have played in Thracion have become Dungeon Masters themselves, right? And here's the issue, right? All the knowledge they have of Thracion is worthless. The moment they go to anybody else's table, they're starting at zero, because all the Thracion knowledge that they had in their head just evaporates, because no other Dungeon Master runs it. But if I had run in Forgotten Realms, they would know about Waterdeep, they would know about Phandalin, they would know about Neverwinter, and that knowledge, right, is going to echo literally through every single Dungeons and Dragons era, right? The Gygaxian era, the D&D hardbacks, canon hardbacks in the Gygaxian era, the Lorrainian era, the Dancian era, the Heinsoonian era, and now the Perkinian era, right? And that knowledge is incredibly valuable, right? Because there's been more work put into those worlds than anything I have ever created, and I cannot surpass Forgotten Realms simply because I don't have the time and the resources, and you can't either, right? That's the issue, right? And if you run your games in Forgotten Realms, you're going to be able to do all these amazing things and add in a little bit, you're going to put your hot sauce on the taco, right? You're not going to completely rebuild the taco, right? And that's the issue, is if you subject Dungeon Dragon players to your nonsense, world, which is a fraction as good as Forgotten Realms, because there's literally been 4 decades of building from super geniuses who were paid professionally to build it out, you're never going to meet that with your little crap, custom world, right? And so you're going to be 15, 20, maybe 33% off from Forgotten Realms, but all the knowledge that your player characters gain is worthless the next time they go to run their own world, or the next time they go to another Dungeon Master, right? And whereas they could have known about Harbin Wester in Phandalin, and they could have known about Laeral Silverhand in Waterdeep, and the Mass Lords and the Open Lord, and they could have understood about Lord Dagult Neverember in Neverwinter, right? And they could have understood about the economies of these cities, and the Tales of the Yawning Portal and all these other things, plus your cool stuff, right? And you're building them out as strong, powerful dragon players, rather than saying, hey, here's a bunch of knowledge that will never be useful again to anyone, right? And so that's why, shut your custom world down. It is nonsense, it is junk, and it is an offense to every single dragon player out there. Stop wasting their time with your nonsense. That is my humble opinion. All of that is my humble opinion. I'm eager to hear your humble opinion. Let me know in the comments below, please, or respond with a video. Those are always fun. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.